this telecast on YouTube?
Yes, sir.
They were still working on it, but I didn't talk to them. They were on the roof when I left.
You know the sign. At least there was one. They'll go to, I mean, for the guys that pass the driver's test. Yes, they're all basics. No, they'll go to the same grade. We're gonna have to look at the step. It should be the same step. But they went to, it should be step one. But, like Bell, he's more senior, he's got more years in. He may end up going to like step two or three. So, I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it might be. I could really. I think I've got a permit too. He's just gonna get shots. So, probably what I'll do, we'll see. We'll just have to wait and see. But I don't think they're probably effective Friday. We'll have to wait. Because by their rules, it had to be in yesterday before. Okay, I would like to welcome everybody to the public safety meeting. It is 4:30, Tuesday, July 14th. I need a motion to, for the approval of the agenda and motion
for approval of the minutes.
Do you want a roll call or notation?
Nah, only Miss Angela Moore isn't here.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda for the July 14th Public Safety Committee as written.
Okay? Oh, you're not going to do the minutes at the same time, right? No. Okay. Ah, her wordsmithing. Second? Okay, we have a second from Savino. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Ooh, nobody opposes. Shall we go for the second one? Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes from the Public Safety Committee meeting held on June 16th, 2020, as presented.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a second. So please show on the minutes that Miss Angela came in the door at 4:32. And all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, we are going to rock on to regular items, protective jackets and pants for our firefighters. Mr. Devon.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, thank you. Members of the committee, what we're asking you to consider is award of ITB 21-001, which is would award a contract to Ellen Curtis and Sons for purchasing our structural firefighting PPE. This is high dollar equipment that if we tried to buy it without a contract, we would be in violation of the procurement every time we tried to go out to buy it. And so obviously having a contract makes it a little more easy for us to make those purchases. In addition, we were able to establish pricing through a competitive bid process. After review of the specs that were submitted, they do meet our minimum standard for the specs that we were looking for, and so our recommendation is to move forward, send this to full council. That's what we're asking for.
Okay, do we have any questions from the counselors? Ms. Judy?
No?
Okay.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Moore? Mr. Savino? No questions? Okay. Okay, so I need a motion for the one regular item so far.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move to recommend to full council on the consent agenda for the August council meeting awarding of ITB 21-001 protective jacket and pants for structural firefighting, the bid to L.N. Curtis and Sons for a total ensemble, I like
That goes.
that, price bid of $3,389.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a second from Mr. Savino. Okay, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. It moves to consent. Devin, that gives each one of our men 2 sets, right? A set on and a set off. Am I right, or am I lost?
This action does not do that. What this action does is provide us with the contract by which to purchase.
Okay.
So this doesn't have anything to do with our second set
Okay.
project that we have going, but this is one of the steps that had to take place.
Okay. I probably should have asked that beforehand. Oh, well, I'm a little backwards. We're good.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, our next one is number 5, consider the amendments. Nope, I'm sorry. Up one more. Condemnations.
Excuse me.
Got a lot of paperwork. Mr. Morris?
Good afternoon. This is the request for approval for Resolution 20-XX, which is condemnations, beginning on page 73. There's 8 of them that are on the list. And they're on the condemnation list because of dilapidated conditions, deterioration, open to public, and inadequate maintenance. This is our standard routine monthly agenda packet, and staff is recommending approval on consent. Stand for any questions.
Any questions?
Could I ask one? I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
may have asked this before. Bill, so many of these, the only address that you have is the address of the property. And how successful is that in notifying the folks? I'm assuming many of these don't have anyone living in them at the time.
Most of them are not, no. My understanding is that there are a fair number that do come back, but
Unclaimed, I mean,
Unclaimed, yeah.
undeliverable.
I can't tell you how many. That would be a Bill Bartlett question.
Well, I don't need a specific number, but
And many of them, they do go to that address. That's the last known address
know.
of the owner as record at the county assessor's office. So that's the only place we notice in them. Many times these are vacant properties, open to the public. So we fulfill our obligation by, and
Right.
much of the time, we get those returned back to us.
so they still obviously remain on the list, whether or not the owner's actually been able to be contacted or not.
That's correct.
That's really too bad. I wish there were a better way, but I know there isn't. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Angela, anything? Nothing? Okay. So I need a motion to consider the resolution to go to consent agenda.
Make a motion to consider the resolution 20-XX condemnations to consent agenda for the August.
Okay. I have a motion from Ms. Angela, and I need a second, please.
Second.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second for Resolution 20XX to go to consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, moving right along. Mr. Morris, it's you again, Chapter 16. I believe this is the one that we brought back from City Council so we could get a little more wording on it. Am I correct?
No, this is the actual changes to the ordinance. That'll be the next one. We'll do
Okay,
that one.
I'm
coming
one ahead.
back.
Sorry.
So this is one we've gone through and spent, this is the third time?
Yes.
On this one, and it's starting to look like more like an ordinance. We put it into an ordinance format. And so going through, we've cleaned it up, starting on 78. If there's any questions, I think we've gone through most of these several times, 79, page 79, 80, solid waste accounts. We put that in there. We took out on page 81, that section 16-8, because it's not relevant any longer. And there's a lot more original stuff where we put it in, then we took it out, or that we took it out and then put it back in, or those kinds of things we've taken out to clean up. And so this is actually at this point pretty clean all the way down to starting on page 86. We have a little bit there. There was some discussions about at the very bottom there, sporting events and ordinances, exemptions to the noise ordinance. Then we came over on the other page and we changed out the Planning and Zoning Committee to Code Enforcement Division. And that you'll see repleted on the next page and on to 89. Continuing on, we had the, on page 91, we had, took out the private, authorized private receptacle for litter and garbage. On 92, we have the no leaf blowing, and then into the flood control, litter in the flood control, storm drainage areas, put back in there. Now on page 95, there's 3 questions up at the top there that we were going to try to get everything else resolved, and then just focus on these 3 questions this time. And that will basically, well, we thought it was. Then our attorney came in and said that we got another 12 pages to consider with camping stuff that we got to talk about. But going past 95, we took out a bunch of stuff on page 96 and 97. It just wasn't needed. Going on to page 100 at the bottom there, this is some new stuff that we added for camping and campgrounds. Trying to beef that up a little bit. There was a question on recreational vehicles and trailers may be used within the city. This is under C. This is new. Subject to the provisions of Article 24 locations of mobile homes, travel trailers, recreational vehicles, and/or oversized vehicles outside of approved districts of the City of Roswell zoning code. And that was just a straight citation to that, so we were consistent between this article and then the zoning code. And actually I included on page 103 the actual section out of the zoning code pertaining to oversized or mobile homes, travel trailers, recreation, and/or oversized vehicles outside of the approved districts. So that's what we have in the zoning code. So this is a pointer. I like those better because you make one change, you don't have to make exact duplicate changes in two places, and that's when things happen. We added a D, recreational vehicles or camps and all items may be removed by the city after a 24-hour notice of violation has been issued by the city. And then E, sleeping on public benches, sidewalks is prohibited. And then going down to use, it shall be unlawful for a person to camp within the city, including inside all flood control drainage areas or other bodies of water unless he camps within a campground that's been issued a business registration by the city. And so I think that next time we're going to, staff has to kind of digest the text we've got for how to remove, Margaret, you can jump in anytime if you're on this one, how to remove stuff legally from a camp or a person sleeping on sidewalks.
Sure, yeah. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and councilors. So this kind of came about through looking at, this is something I've been looking at for years almost since I've been here, is the issue of homeless people creating kind of encampments, and they do. And, we talked last time about some of the constitutional protections that may be out there for, you can't make it illegal to be homeless, that's not fair. But what you end up having is public nuisances where you have situations in which these become dangerous to the health and safety of the surrounding people and to the people living in them, because of course there's no plumbing to these encampments and all these things. And so the question becomes, what can we do about a place like this? And doing a lot of research into what other cities have done and what has been given the, blessing by the courts that this is okay. I was looking at some other jurisdictions and, so the way that you can go about this is you have to give people a lot of notice and fairness in the way that you handle them, but we do have a power to abate public nuisances. That includes going into some place where people are camping on sidewalks or in public parks or in waterways or other places where they've set up some kind of, not illegal, but, not sanctioned type of, living community out of, trailers or camps or whatever. They, create houses out of cardboard boxes and it's just, and there's drugs going on in there and it's a real bad situation. So what we can do is we can build an ordinance that gives us the authority to clear these out by building in a lot of due process. And so you see cities like Portland, Oregon that have a lot of homeless people, and they do this all the time. And it's been, like as I say, it's been reviewed by courts and allowed. And so you have to go through a lot of steps. You start out ahead of time with, you go and you post notices all over the place. On such and such a date, we're coming. And so if you want to get out of here before then, get out. But on that date, we're going to come and we're going to take everything, we're clearing it out. And so, then all the waste and stuff gets destroyed, and anything that appears to be to the best judgment of the city, personal items of homeless individuals are then set aside, and another notice goes up in the same place that says you have X number of days to come and claim your things, and if you don't, they're destroyed. Okay, and so that protects them in terms of due process, and also in terms of seizures of, under the Fourth Amendment, you can't seize someone's property unreasonably. Well, this takes care of that. We're not seizing it unreasonably. We give you it's a public hazard, and then we give you the opportunity to come back later and claim your stuff. And so by protecting their rights every step of the way, we can abate a nuisance. And so that is what I'm proposing, that we create some language in our ordinances that allow us to tackle these kind of situations going forward. And so that's kind of what we're looking at doing. I don't have sample language just yet. It's kind of a new idea, but I hope by next time we'll have some provisions that we can insert into what we've been doing in the nuisance code so far.
So am I hearing two sets of signs? The first one is, this is when we're coming in, then we remove it into a pile, and the second one is, they got to come and get what's in the pile?
Yes.
Kind of like a lost code at school.
Right, yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
you notify them on the front end, and then you notify them on the back end.
So we've got to internalize this, digest this, try to make it fit our system best we can and still maintain those standards. We can thin it down because it was designed for a much larger community. I think we can do a better job on that. So, but we just have to synthesize what we've gotten from these other places.
Do we have verbiage so we don't have to reinvent the wheel from another city? Like-
Yes, in fact, the one we were particularly looking at is out of, funnily enough, out of Honolulu. And the reason why I focused on that one is because I actually found some federal court cases reviewing these type of ordinances and saying these ones are good, those ones are bad, and one of the ones that they said, this one's great, was Honolulu. And so I went out there and found it and was able to pull it off their website. No, I didn't go out to Honolulu. I wish I had. But I went online and to their website and was able to pull their ordinance off of their website, and it was good stuff.
Okay, cool.
I am kind of concerned with that.
Can you pull your microphone over a little bit, please? Thank you.
I have a small concern with that wording, but I guess once I read it, I just feel like if you just go into someone's home and, that's their home to them, that's all they have, and for you to decide, person decide that this is trash, and it may not be, that's all they have, and so my concern about throwing those things away. Now, holding them for them, letting them come back, I did, but I don't think it's fair for us to go to for y'all, whoever, to be able to go through their things and say, well, this is trash, so we're gonna throw this away, or, let them do that, I guess, but.
From what I understand is they're going to give them anywhere from a 24 to a 48-hour notice. They can take what they want and, take what they need or whatever. We pick it up, we put it in a pile, then they come back and go through that pile. So they have 2 times. Now, keep in mind, they're camping on private property where they shouldn't be, unless it's their property. So
Most of the time.
that's 2 times that they get that chance, but I can debate that all day.
So the idea is that what would be immediately destroyed would be like syringes, things like that are, medical dangerous
Garbage.
waste and things like, those would be immediately just, we're not dealing with that stuff. But anything else that, erring on the side of, we're going to assume that everything that belongs to people that they want, except for dangerous medical waste, and things like that. And then all that stuff is put aside, right? And then again, there's as they come through, your stuff will be available here and here, and then a written notice that they can come, if they come later and see it, that they can come get their stuff. We don't want to destroy people's stuff. That is absolutely not the concept here. This is really about, a dangerous situation that's dangerous for those people themselves. It's dangerous to the community, but it's also dangerous to those people to live in those kind of conditions. And so it's got to go. But we're not trying to destroy people's personal possessions, not at all.
I have one more question on page 86, down at the bottom where we talked about sporting events. What sporting events take place in residential areas that are not like the baseball fields or the?
It could be areas, anything that is occurring within or within a residential district. It could be the baseball leagues and all these kind of things. I think that's the intent here.
But they're on the field, they're on property though, they're not.
But
necessarily-
they're on city property, but it could be held on other places. The idea for an exemption is just to try to encapsulate other weird possibilities that might happen.
So
If it's,
okay, sorry.
I'm sorry.
So say your family's having a family reunion, we can't have those anymore, but, there's a big football game going on. There's family, is that considered, would you consider
No.
that in a
They-
sporting event that has to be, they can only do once?
once a month, and it, because it is, if they're going past 11 o'clock, and, that sounds like a pretty serious thing, but it could happen. And there would be a lot of cars and noise and everything else. The idea is to limit it, provided, okay, it's a one-time deal, and cap it at 11 o'clock, and at least have some kind of time frame on that.
Okay.
Judy, you have anything else? So, Okay, go ahead. What page you on?
Sorry. And if I understood correctly, let me see, where am I? On page 95, there's still some additions to do, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That's-
These are three questions that were, Bill Bartlett wanted to have addressed.
Oh, I see.
And so and the idea was to get rid of everything else to get to these, because some of these are, you'll recognize the maximum number of vehicles. We're talking about that at city council. We will be next month with respect to major and minor home occupations. How many vehicles can you have for these
Right.
things? This one is more of a broader scope. I don't know, that's a pretty significant jump. I don't know if that's something that you guys want to even begin to start to get into, but that's something he's just asking. Do you want to consider it? If so, I would come back with some language with this. I think it would be it's a tough thing, because like I said before, a lot of these the properties that we have in the city were not designed for all the stuff that have now happened, people want to have located on site, where everybody in the household above 16 has a car. And there's usually a car and a truck. And then there's the work truck. And so there's a lot of vehicles, and there's a lot of places in towns where it's really, streets are not two-lane streets anymore. They're basically one-lane streets, and you just have to take your turn. It's gotten to be an issue that where they're parking on a lot of places to see the parking on, not just in the parking space or in the driveway, but also on the front lawn, or both cars on the front lawn. And so that has an impact on values. And so that's where Bill is coming from on this. And I think it's a reasonable question, but this is a kind of a big question, and I don't know if we're ready to take this one on yet. I'd like to personally figure out what we're going to do with the major and minor home occupations first, because that's the first time that we've addressed some kind of limitation with respect to with a commercial operation in a residential area. The maximum, he's also asked to look at, right now, basically an operational vehicle is like you turn on, you get a key and it fires up. He would, and a lot of other places would like to know if maybe want to consider trying to have vehicles requiring to have current registration, which is another step. Instead of just having them sit there, we have some places around town you can drive where they're basically car lots sitting out in front. They all run, but you can't drive them because there's no registration on there. That's another question Bill would like to ask. And then finally, looking at authorizing code enforcement to be able to tow inoperable vehicles located in the street or the street right-of-way. Currently, right now, that's not something that he can do. My understanding is that's a police function. Right? I think I'm right. And so he would like to be able, just a question, there are times when he would like to be able to say, I need that vehicle right now gone. And the police are tied up with other stuff, and he would just like to know if it would be something that we would like to look at as a possibility. Authorizing code enforcement to be able to have a vehicle towed in the same conditions that the police would do it. So those are the three things. And I'm putting them out there for consideration, and if it's yes, fine, we'll pursue it. If not, we'll strike it out and go on to the next question.
Madam Chair, I like what you've said about all three of these. Maximum number of vehicles. I know there's a need for that. I would question whether that's something you can legislate, I guess. But I don't know. And I do also like the idea of being able to tow inoperable vehicles, inoperable. But again, and especially in the rights of way. I know some of the ones that I pass all the time. I know those vehicles are parked in the right of way. There may not be grass or sidewalk or any of that, and they do move around, but they're still in violation of parking in the right of way. I'm sorry. I had another question is, can you remove, I guess, a vehicle that does not have a current registration? Is
It's not
that,
registered. If it's,
I'm sorry, Mike, thank you.
If it's currently on the property and it doesn't have a valid registration, the only way we can do it is if it's an inoperable vehicle, say all the tires are taken off of it, they'll serve them a notice for an inoperable vehicle. And they put tires on it, they start it up, they pull it forward, back it up, there's nothing we can do about it. It doesn't have to have a valid registration or anything. That's the problem. If the vehicle is a valid, operable vehicle, then anybody could jump in that vehicle and drive it, which then they would be in violation because it's not a registered vehicle. So I think, and I haven't spoken to Bill, but that may be what he was alluding to there. Because if it's an inoperable vehicle on the property, they can serve that. They can give notice for that to abate that. But if it's
That's
just a,
already listed somewhere, I'm assuming.
right, if it's
Okay,
an
good.
inoperable vehicle, that's already in the code.
Right, okay.
But if it's a operable vehicle, but does not have a registration on it, there's nothing they can do about it. So it may be a vehicle that, like I stated, that's been sitting there for years in the same spot. And they throw a battery in it, they start it, that's all they gotta do.
Okay. Okay,
Now,
thank you.
Parker may have something else to add to that, but that's currently how they.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
I guess there's two issues to my mind. One is inoperable and the other is in the right of way. And they kind of get at two different issues. I mean, so you could have, like, I think Councilor Stubbs was alluding to this, a vehicle that's always parked every day in the right of way, and they move it a little bit and they move it back, and that's still obstructing and basically obstructing all the time, but it's technically operable. And so maybe the way to approach it, because we can already say inoperable vehicles, that's what's already in our code. Maybe the issue here is more vehicles that are consistently being put in the right of way and blocking. I don't know. That would be my thought about it. because-
Obstructing traffic.
Obstructing traffic, sort of deal, yeah. And I think it's already a violation of the city traffic ordinances to be parking in the street to the extent that it makes it so narrow that cars can't get by. In reality, we all know that that happens pretty much all over the city, but I think technically that's already illegal.
Madam Chair.
Judy, are you done?
I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have trouble with us trying to regulate how many cars a person can have. If I can afford them or I can't have them. I have trouble with that. I understand in the right of way and the unoperables, I'm all good and all that, but let's try to go and try to tell somebody how many cars they can have. If I got 18 people in my house, why come I can't have 18 cars? I mean, if I can afford them and they're registered or whatever. Now, the register, I'm iffy about the registration because I feel like this, because I've been in a place before that I had a car that was running, but I didn't register because I had another car that I was driving, so I didn't keep it registered because I'm like, why I'm keep paying that car if I'm driving, my other car, and so I kind of iffy about that because I can understand such a situation where that could happen, not regular all the time, but I think it was about a year or so before I let mine go without registering because I wasn't driving it. Because I had got a new one, so she had been kicked to the curb. So, but she got run into driving, so I got to listen to. So I don't this maximum number. I don't want to get into that. I don't think with that. But the other one, the right of way and the inoperable vehicles, I think we should get the wording and put that back in wherever you needed that to go. And like I said, I don't know about the current registration. I don't know. I think we could play that one kind of by ear, I think, if you're not going to put the wording in right now. Because you're saying that you need to bring something to put the wording, so we don't know what the wording is going to be right there, but there's going to be some words there. Is that what you're saying?
correct. I mean, we're not going to, we're just wondering if you want us to pursue these three ideas. If not, if you want to scratch them, we'll scratch them and save our energy for something that you guys do want us to try to go after. But those are the three questions. I just want to know, do you want us to pursue them or not?
You done? Okay, my personal opinion is I think we need to work on all three, driving out and around. I think with your registration, you also need to include insurance because those go hand in hand. maximum number of vehicles on a certain amount of property. We certainly do it for the puppy dogs in town and give them a certain amount of property to stay on and stuff. And our whole idea, if I remember back 2012 when I started this in my brain, the whole idea is to make sure that our neighborhoods are nice, neat, tidy. And there's many neighborhoods that have cars in it. Yes, you can put a battery in them, you move them forward a foot, you move them back a foot, they sit, the grass is up above them, so forth and so on. So I think maximum number of vehicles, maybe per footage, you know, or in the backyard, or hidden, so forth and so on, if you could look into that somehow. That way it doesn't limit them on the 1959 Chevy that they're trying to put together and the block is on the ground and the motor's up in the air, so forth and so on. So it still gives the boys their chance to, or girls, their chance to rebuild their old cars. So I think investigating all three of these, they're not set in stone right now. We can tweak them, we can move them around, but it does help our departments, code enforcement, police, fire. All right, pigeon. Because if you have vehicles in the yard the way they are on South Richardson, you cannot get to those structures fire-wise. You just can't get in there and all that, so that's a hazard also. So that's my 2 cents worth.
But then when you think about on Richardson, on some of those places, they're old, you know, places, and back then they weren't building the big driveways, and like we do, our newer houses have more property, more driveway, and so I feel the same right after Richardson and Alameda. You can barely get, you know, and I understand that, but there's no even driveway for some of those houses. There's not even a driveway, so, you know, I think we kind of have to think about that when we try to limit, you know, that kind of thing. Think about the area that it's in. Maybe there's no place to park but on the street. You know, because a lot of those don't have a driveway. So I think, you know, like you said, since we're going to come back with it, I think it's a good idea, you know, if you want to look at it. But I just think we have to keep those in mind when we start to say how many cars can be there and where they can park, if that's their only place to park.
Okay. And we're coming back with it, so I'm good with moving on and just getting that information in there. So since we're going to go ahead and do that, I want to move back over to the Honolulu. We can call it the Honolulu article. How does that sound? I'm very much into that. I like your hours, whatever the hours need to be for warning people. And this way it's going to help us keep our city and our waterways clean.
What page?
Pardon me?
What page?
Oh, I'm sorry, 101.
Oh,
Like
here
the
it is.
temperature outside.
Here it is, right here.
But I definitely agree with keeping our waterways clean and nothing going down our waterways. Flood control, they go through there and they clean every now and then. I don't know what their rules are. That may be something you want to check into with flood control and county, see what their rules are, because part of that country's theirs. And they need to have a little skin in the game. You know how I am with the county having skin in the game. So that might want to go there too. Anybody else have anything on?
Could,
Yes, ma'am.
this is another thing. Section 8-7, use required, which is on page 101. After the yellow, it says unless he camps within, I think it's the camps within.
Shall be
It'll be
unlawful
a,
for any person.
we'll make it neutral.
I think it's the.
No.
Camp,
it-
oh,
Yeah, it
maybe
shall
it
be
is.
unlawful for any person to camp within the city
Unless
unless
he
he camps
camps.
within a campground.
If they can't.
Unless the camping is within
We have two English
a
teachers
campground.
here.
Or unless they can't.
Two English teachers here.
Gender neutral is they
You
can't.
guys are in trouble.
I don't like that, and whatever. Anyway, that probably needs to be looked at. Thank you.
I mean, I think you can eliminate he camps altogether. It shall be unlawful for any person to camp within the city unless within a campground.
It's more than one, a he camp? Yes,
I think
please.
you can just get rid of he camps altogether
Yes.
and then just avoid the issue.
Yes, thank you.
There y'all go. Y'all done good.
Can I just say, I think page 102 is out of order. I don't know how that happened, but I think,
No, that's correct, because there's actually 3 sections in the ordinance. The first one is the modifications to those components. The second is the severability, and three is the severability, 4 is the effective date. There's a 1 and a 2 in there.
But isn't page 103 and 104 part of this?
103 is actually the zoning code section.
It's another section.
Okay, so it doesn't have an abstract. Okay.
another-
No, it was put in there for reference. You remember there was a reference on page 100 at the very
Oh,
bottom
okay,
for
okay.
recreational vehicles, and we said, we just wanted to use the zoning code language, so I included it so you could see what the zoning code language
Thank you.
was. Just for
Never mind.
reference purposes.
Thank you.
Continue on, Mr. Bill.
Okay.
Are we done with that one?
I believe so, and we'll work on it and bring it back.
So it'll come back on our next meeting.
We're going to have to do a road trip to Honolulu.
Count me in. Okay, so now we are on consider resolution 20-38, the
Yes.
chronic nuisance. So this is the one that came back from city council.
Correct, and so we have modified chapter 20-38 to try to be a lot clearer about what our intent is. And those changes are really at the bottom of page 106. And what we're trying to do is to say there's 3 distinct parts in this. Number 1, the city council does concur with the findings provided by the city manager that the properties identified in this resolution do constitute nuisance properties as determined in Article 4 of Chapter 16 of the Roswell City Code. And so it just says, thou art problem child, pieces. The information that you had in here is to show a trigger. Basically, it's the tripwire. All the information is about the costs we already previously spent on these properties. The idea is to demonstrate that there's a lot of evidence that these properties are problem child properties. So, number 1, your nuisance property. Number 2, city council hereby authorizes the city manager to issue to the owners of the premises demand for payment for any fees accumulated after a determination of the properties being a nuisance property. So, after the city council has determined that these are nuisance properties, anything that happens out there that is billable, we can bill to the owners directly. It's just trying to make it clear. And then the third thing that came up was number 3, about like an effective date. And internally it was, well, there is no effective date. It starts from here until the property is taken care of. So the termination of being a nuisance property will stay in effect until the property owner is able to demonstrate, whoever the owner is at that time, that adequate controls have been established to abate all adverse impacts to the neighborhood emanating from that nuisance property. So it just stays in effect until somebody, the property owner, takes care of it. It can be done.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this stays in effect till the property owner does something. What happens if this property owner sells it, signs the title over, quitclaim deed? Does the next owner get the grandfathered in?
It's their property.
It's grandfathered in, so it moves on to the next property owner, and they have to pay it before they strip it and do whatever they're gonna do to it.
They inherited a nuisance property.
Do
or they
we need
bought.
to put that in there somewhere? Because that was one of the questions that Counselor Oropesa. So this stays with this property until it is paid and taken care of.
And I would argue that, until the property owner takes care of it, whoever the property owner is.
Okay, I
At
get
that
that.
time.
But we've got to,
Okay.
say indefinitely, because they can argue, I'm not a lawyer, don't want to be one, but in my world, they can argue, you know what, doesn't say anywhere on here it's grandfathered in. I got that quitclaim deed, it's been quitclaim deed to the cousin down the street. You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? And then they're gonna quitclaim it deed back to the other one, and it's gonna be a
The
hopscotch.
problem is going to be that that effectively makes it a covenant that runs with the land, which has to be recorded as an interest in the county.
Correct. What's the county gonna say?
Well, and then we get into the question of what is the status of this special charge in terms, like, does it become a lien? How do we affect it as, how do we create it as a lien? Because in order for it to become a covenant that runs with the land, in other words, as it transfers from owner to owner, that follows the property through ownership, that requires that it, be, that it meets special requirements. For example, I mean, if it's not filed with the county, then the next owner can legally say, I didn't have fair notice of it, even notwithstanding it's been published in the paper as a legal matter, right? Unless that's the whole point of recording things in the county, is that everybody is fair notice if it's in the chain of title. And so if it's not in the chain of title, a subsequent owner will have a strong legal argument that it doesn't bind them. So
So
we're gonna,
again, my question is, do we need to have this in black and white when these letters go out to these people saying, if you don't take care of this, whether you sell your land or not, it's still, because that may be a quick out for them. They may say, oh, I need a quick out. I'm going to quick claim this.
well, the charge is against, as it's written right now, the special charge against the owner. So that it follows, you sell it, it's still a charge you owe, because it's your own, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a distinction between something that attaches to the land and an obligation of the owner, right? And so this is a special charge, as it's written right now, and as I see it contemplated in the way the ordinance is drafted, it's a special charge against the owner. So even if you sell the property, you still owe the money, because they're the nuisance activities that you allowed to happen. So
Okay,
you're-
so we can't, so he's sold the property, he still has the bill, we can't get anything out of him and the property's gone. You see, even though it's a lien, of course, if it's a lien, you can't sell the property unless the bill is paid. I get that.
Yes.
So this needs to be worded that way. Am I not reading it that way? Am I being bullheaded today? Look at Angela, yeah. I just want to warn us that we need to make sure this trails whoever gets it, and they don't play hodgepodge checkerboard on us, and it gets lost somewhere, and a court comes in and says, yeah, you didn't have it worded correctly, and you're stuck.
Parker, could we have, as part of this process, after the determination, that a formal letter be sent to the property owner, but also recorded with the county?
Yeah, we could record it.
And so it would be just a little re-recordation fee, like we do, and so it'd be part of the process.
And Madam Chair, if I could, real quick, in committee, and I may be wrong on these two particular properties, but I believe both of them may have already gone through on the condemnation list. So they may at some point be scheduled for demolition, because currently there's nobody occupying these properties. So that may end up being the final resolution on these two particular ones. Now, you could have other instances where people are residing in that structure, and they continue to reside there and would continue to have properties. That's when the owner would receive that. Once it was deemed a nuisance property, they would start collecting those letters or bills assigned to them because of the nuisance activity. Also, I just want to make clear, once the council determines their property is a nuisance property, we don't go back and charge them for the previous expenses. We included that for explanation, like Bill said, on what we spent up to this time in manpower and equipment. It would be from that point on, once the council says, yes, this is a nuisance property, starting that day, that next day we go out to that property, those charges could be levied against the owner for that time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Parker.
That is correct. And on that point, I would ask or recommend one little change to the final whereas. The city manager has calculated police response and enforcement costs from additional nuisance activities and assess such costs as a special charge against the said premises, and then strike all of which findings and calculations are set forth in Exhibit C, because it was exactly that confusion that got the issue, was that we aren't putting those, what's in Exhibit C are prior costs to document the nuisance activity. What we're charging as a special assessment are future costs, right? So we're authorizing, what you're doing here with this is you're concurring in the finding of a nuisance property and authorizing the city manager to assess future costs as a special charge against the owner. So the special charges are not necessarily going to be in the ordinance because they haven't really happened yet, potentially.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know about you, I don't know what your concern is about the next owner. I think if the person, because I don't think it's fair for the new person to have to pay what the old person didn't take care of. But, so I think I agree with, the way I understand, it's gonna be with the person that accused the charges, no matter what, he still has to pay. So if Bob has the charges, even if it sells to Peter, Bob still has to pay. Is that the way it's looking?
Yes, it's a special charge against the property owner. So, so normally, when you have an interest that, like, so in a conventional lien situation, it becomes both, because the owner of the property is the one who incurred the cost, but the lien allows the money to become attached to or secured by the land. And so we go after the owner personally, but a lot of times we either can't find the owner or the owner doesn't have any money. And so just like a mortgage, the lien is secured. The land becomes like collateral that allows you to foreclose it and sell the land at an auction and try and get back your money. And that's how a lien functions. Basically like a forced mortgage is essentially what a lien is. So you can kind of, with a lien process, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can go against the person whose fault it is and come at the property itself.
This may be too simplified, but could we just, on number 3, the determination of being a nuisance property will stay with the property in effect until the property owner? So I'm just adding after the first stay in number 3, with the property and.
I like that idea, because that tells me, as simple-minded as I am, whoever has that property has to pay that bill. Because cousin can quit claim it over to someone else and that bill just goes away. That's not what we want. With a lien, it won't. I get that. But with the extra billing, it would just go away. And if we put that it stays with the property until the property's taken care of, that is content to me.
Yeah, we can do that. We can add that
And
language.
the person that buys it knows that it goes with it, because they're going to file it at the county courthouse. So they know when they buy it, which they buy that land usually pennies on the dollar anyway, because it is a nuisance property. I'm content with that verbiage.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Bill?
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay.
Mhm.
I see you writing.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Are we all good with that? Can we move on? May I have a motion, please? Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please.
Sure. Madam Chair, I move to recommend approval of resolution, this one actually has a number.
It does.
20-38, I don't know where I am. I move to recommend to full city council approval of resolution 20-38 as amended.
Okay.
Is
I
that
have-
all?
Sounds good to me. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I have a second with Counselor Sabino. So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, it moves on up to full council. Okay, we have non-action items. Chief Smith. This one is going to be on the SB 8 law enforced body camera by our wonderful governor. No comment.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, sorry.
That's okay. It don't matter.
Getting tied up in the grammaticals. I wrote a little summary sheet on this thing. In a nutshell, about last week, the legislature up there passed a bill, SB 8, mandating all law enforcement officers within the state to wear body cameras and record. It was signed, I think, Thursday by the governor. So 90 days from that date, this is supposed to take place. So in a nutshell, if you can call it a nutshell, all law enforcements are required to have their cameras activated while responding to calls for service or during an investigative encounter between the officer and the public. That's the criteria where the cameras will be activated. It is prohibited to have the cameras deactivated until the end of the encounter. You are required to hold the video for 120 days. By the way, we hold it for 180 by our policy. Disciplinary rules are for failing to operate the camera, intentionally manipulating the camera recording, premature erasure, and then there's the order also goes into the definition of body-worn cameras, electronic devices, law enforcement agencies, which is your state, local, and county law enforcement agencies were named specifically, and the definition of a peace officer, which is a full-time sworn officer in the state of New Mexico. New Training Act states that they will revoke a police officer certification after conviction or a plea of guilty to a crime of unlawful use of threatened use of physical force, or a crime involving a failure to intervene in the use of lawful force. That's an extension of what was already in place. They are going to establish a board that shall permanently revoke and shall not under any circumstances reinstate certification unless pardoned by the governor or exonerated by the court. The board, they may already mean the LEA 90 board, which is already in existence. Liability. Immunity is granted pursuant to New Mexico SA 1978. That does not apply to the liability for personal injury. And then there's a page of violations that if an officer commits, basically an officer loses the professional indemnity that they used to enjoy being a law enforcement officer. Fiscal impacts, it does not impact the city of Roswell because we have had cameras fully deployed since 2015. So we already had our bugs worked out. We had a policy in place, which is CALIA accredited. We had cameras in place. Currently, we're changing to a better camera and a better system. So we're always looking to upgrade, but we're ahead of the curve on that. Policy impacts, we already have a CALIA accredited policy in place. We actually store the material longer than what the law asks for. Penalties and discipline for non-compliance and activation and lack thereof, we already have in place and have had in place. We mandate that you initiate the camera when you're at a call for service. Just so a little fun factoid, an individual officer cannot manipulate their videotape once it's done. It is frozen and it can't be altered. But of course they had to cover that. Records management personnel, which is a hidden cost that a lot of agencies aren't aware of, but we already have that built into ours. Our records clerk handles the IPRA requests. Supervisors and records handle the management of the and the storage of the data. So the impact to RPD for this particular order, it will impact our undercover operations because the order has not clarified. It's a general blanket, whereas if you're involved in an investigation or you are sent to a call for service, and that will cover an undercover investigation. What we're doing about it is myself and 4 other chiefs within the state are going to create a model policy to submit to the governor's office, and hopefully they will use that as their model policy because there was a lot of discussion on the floor before this bill was passed. Just some of that discussion didn't make it to the written form. So we're hoping they'll go back to it and acknowledge that some of those issues were brought up. And at least 4 of Roswell, New Mexico State, Rio Rancho, and Farmington were the contributors to that model policy. Not going to belabor the fact that this is, I don't agree with this. We already had the policy in place, but I don't think it should be forced, but I'll field any questions.
Ms. Judy, do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not really. Funding, money-wise, financially-wise, is already taken care of for our part. Since you said we already had them, and I remember discussion once before about the updates, so that's not going to affect us financially or, this time around, this requirement.
No, I'm glad you asked.
Everybody has one.
Everybody in the state is going to have to, but I'm glad you asked that. We plan for this. This is part of our operating budget. We believe in the cameras. The cameras 99.9% of the time protect our police department and protect the city of Roswell. So we believe in that equipment. It's one of the best pieces of technology I've seen in at least the last 20 years. But to segue off of your question, Councilor Moore, there is a grant out there that covers the equipment portion of it, and we submit for it every year. But for other agencies, the bigger expense is going to be the personnel that have to manage it, which is what our records supervisor does, and the cost of storage. Our storage has increased, but we've got a better deal on our equipment. We're always moving and shaking down there, but that is an issue, but we were already involved in it. Most of your contemporary agencies take the cameras and accept it. It's a good piece of equipment for us.
Any other questions? I would, excuse me, I'd like you to tell the audience, whoever's out there, how much we pay to just store. And I know we keep getting a better deal, and that's the whole thing, but I want you to tell them how much it cost us to store this footage for the amount of time that we store it. And you've already mentioned how hard it is going to be on the smaller communities, Dexter, Hegerman, these smaller communities that don't have these cameras or the facilities to do this, that haven't got their grants out there, and this has just been slapped on them, and they got to conform to it in 90 days. Please.
Sure. Actually, our contract, which just expired, actually we extended it 6 months. It was $40,000 a year for storage. Albuquerque was paying $40,000 a month. Those numbers have gone up. As a matter of fact, I have a fiscal report here. But what the new contract, the reason why we didn't jump on board with Axon is it went to $87,000 a year. DC, working a brand new deal with our new company. And what's our storage looking like? Actually, I'm gonna let the deputy chief come up here,
Thank you.
because this is his baby, and very, very happy with what he's done with our new equipment.
This is Deputy Chief Mike
Mike
Stanton.
Stan.
Thank you.
What was the question?
The main question is, I want our citizens to understand how much this has thrown city into another area of cost. I mean, we already prepared as a city. We've had cameras since 15, okay, so we've had cameras that long. We've gone through the steps of the storage and stuff, but since the state has mandated every police officer to wear this, even the little towns, Dexter, Hegerman, and I may be overstepping my bounds as a city councilor, but I want it out there to be known how much this is hurting all the towns.
So we've been deployed with our patrol division since 2015, as the chief said. The mandate actually expands that to where any officer that's involved in any kind of investigative capacity has to be running video rather than just audio. A lot of times detectives will do follow-ups and that sort of thing out in the public. Now, rather than just having a voice recorder to recontact a victim, they will also have to have a camera. So it actually grows the amount of storage that we're going to need exponentially based on the number of users that are required by the legislation. As the chief had said, we've been paying $43,000 a year over a 5-year contract with Axon. The new contract was about $83,000, I think you had, 87, for essentially the exact same service that we had. We weren't upgrading the service, we weren't adding additional cameras, it was exactly the same as what we had. When we started looking around, we're fortunate enough to have a size of department that is able to do this with the IT support and everything else. We determined that it was going to be cheaper to store the data ourselves, but that comes with the caveat of now we're 100% responsible. We have to maintain some of the stuff that we record based on the nature of the contact, sometimes indefinitely. I mean, it never goes away. Some of the stuff, because of statute of limitations, you can remove after a certain amount of time. But smaller departments are not going to have the resources to be able to manage that, get rid of the old stuff, determine what can be kept, what can be saved. We're fortunate enough to be large enough and have adequate IT support to be able to manage that, but it just grown to the point where even for us, the cost to continue and maintain what we were already doing was becoming cost prohibitive. So we had to try to find other solutions, especially now that the amount of data that we have to accumulate is going to be so much more.
Is it a gigabyte, so many dollars a gigabyte? Do you purchase points? I mean,
Yeah,
kind of give
it's-
me a clue.
Yeah, so it's based on data, and it's actually based on megabytes.
Megabytes.
And it's certain amount of cents per megabyte, and then determines, it's also dependent upon whether or not it's an active storage, whether it can be accessed immediately, or if it goes into archive status, which means that you can retrieve it, but it could take up to 24 to 48 hours to access it. The archive stuff is a little cheaper to store through these third-party companies. Obviously, only the oldest stuff that we have to maintain, the inactive cases, would fall into that category. So it's not, the vast majority of it is going to be stuff that's active.
Okay. Any questions for this?
I have probably a really stupid question, so
No
forgive me.
question is a
didn't
stupid
ask.
question,
Well,
because someone else may have the same question.
or everybody in the room may know the answer.
So
One or the other.
if I could volunteer this,
Yes, sir.
the deal that we've been kind of working on, or that we're exploring, would be in the first year roughly the same cost as what Axon was proposing per year over 5 years. But then, because there's the upfront costs of building up our own servers and, all the storage and the infrastructure to be able to do it. But then after that, it will drop down to a fraction of that cost, estimating anywhere between about 5 and 10,000 a year versus 80 thereafter. Some years it's going to be a little higher if we have to expand. Other years it's going to be much less.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
what I was trying to get him to.
Well, yeah, that's, I mean, from 40, 80 down to 5 is amazing. Of course, IT changes every 15 minutes. I mean, it's just a constant, ongoing beast that
And that's where we were running into the problem, is the cost of storing data should have become far cheaper, but they added all these extras where you had to have an account for each person and anybody that has access. It was just being almost kind of nickel and dime to death.
What is the average of keeping the footage? Is it 15 days, 30 days for just a normal?
So the legislation mandates that we hold everything for a minimum of 90 days. Our department policy is that we hold everything for a minimum of 120, and that gives times if there's a complaint that comes in, that we, regardless of what the contact is, we have that footage available to be able to investigate complaints or anything that may happen to come in.
Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes, ma'am, please. I'm sorry.
Just, no. Does having cameras help cut down on the so-called paperwork or computer work, or however you do it now, that the officers themselves have to come back and do? I mean, they've got everything documented on the camera or on the tape or whatever, so they're not having to write these reports and that sort of thing. Is it cutting down office time, I guess, is what it is.
3 points of the cameras, the body cam,
Sorry.
it improves case prep, it improves training, and it also provides more transparency to the public, and hopefully, they say in the long run, they would hope that it would drop. In this particular case, this particular law, they think it's going to address police misconduct, brutality, moral turpitude. They think this is the magic arrow. We've already been doing it because we do it, because for the other reasons I said, for training, case prep, and also professional conduct. We want to emphasize and we want to display what we do. And this is a great way to do it. Is the camera, you're bringing an eyewitness to every scene that doesn't have an emotion, doesn't have a tainted view of things. And I'll tell you what, it shortens a lot of things up. And in answer to your question, if we have a complaint, which we take all complaints, if you come in and say that a moth hit the front of the police department and you want to report it, we don't say we don't take those complaints. We take the complaint. That's just an exaggeration, but we take them all. But instead of having an officer and a complainant have to sit for 3 weeks and wait for interviews to be completed, we can just take down the tapes, and it takes 20 minutes to review them, and they don't lie, and they don't exaggerate. So that is one thing that expedites.
Can I also say they're a godsend on the prosecution side?
And I'll tell you one thing they changed. The defense attorneys enjoy it much more. They don't have to utilize a subpoena anymore. All they do is an IPRA request.
There you go.
Not really.
No, because it's all, and obviously, when you're dealing with people's rights and you're on the tax dollar, there's an overkill of documentation for good reason, so.
Chief,
So, do you have a question?
I had a question for you. What were you saying about the concern with the investigators? What is your concern with the cameras and the investigators? Remember that you were saying you think there's, either one?
Oh, you're talking
The undercover, the one he was saying there was a concern,
They're concerned about the undercover operations.
the camera. and-
So
Absolutely.
the legislation doesn't provide for any kind of leeway for dealing with confidential informants or anybody that wants to report something and stay anonymous. They would still have to be recorded, and then because of the state's Public Information Act, that those recordings could theoretically be requested and disclosed and potentially put those people that are willing to give information to the police to help further either a murder investigation or a drug investigation or whatever. It could really put them in serious risk of retaliation or danger. And there's no provisions that allow for being able to keep an anonymity with the legislation as it currently stands.
You know, I will say IPRA does have an exception for law enforcement, but it only applies to pending investigations. The idea being that you can't IPRA something in order to interfere with an ongoing investigation, but once the investigation's over, then it becomes IPRA-able. And so once that case was concluded, if somebody wanted to go and find out and potentially get revenge on an informant, that would possibly be open to them.
Kind of scary, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
And think about the less people gonna talk. Every time I talk to police, I know his camera is rolling, especially if I'm reporting a crime or something's going on, I'm less likely to gonna have that conversation if I know
Correct.
that your camera is running, so makes
They didn't
sense
think
to-
it through.
Well, the law explicitly describes that if you alter the video, which means if you had to blur the faces or you wanted to delete your confidential informant, then the officer could lose his job. And I believe the language is bad faith. So it's explicitly explained how it will penalize the officer, but it doesn't say that there are certain, and that's going to be the point of our model policy, but we have a very short window. So,
In the policy, doesn't it also say that each officer has to hold their own liability insurance for this?
now it does.
Now it does.
Now it does.
Within
Yeah,
the 90 days, each officer has to go out and get their own insurance policy for that camera.
Well, if they're, they're not, what it is an officer right now, if, through the course of their duties, they're protected by the municipality insurance-wise. I don't think an officer's ever protected if they go above and beyond and really hurt somebody and they show malicious intent. I don't think they're ever covered for that. So, as long as your officers are operating within, we should be okay on that. But no, they emphasize the fact, and this is kind of a political show.
Yeah.
Is what it is. And but we're fortunate in this particular case that we were already in the game on it. We were ahead of it. So.
Okay.
So just to explain a little bit how this works, I mean, I think the chief did a real good job talking about how the certification revocation process that's built in. But the other part that he was talking about was the immunity issue, which we kind of touched on here. What they've actually done, what they've taken, so we have the Tort Claims Act, which basically says the city and all of its employees are immune from any lawsuits, and then gives except for ... right? And so what they've done is there's a special one for police officers and says police officers are immune from any damages except for ... And what they've done is they've inserted two new provisions into that, and what they are is negligent spoliation of evidence and intentional spoliation of evidence. And so these are new causes of action that you are permitted to bring. The officers are not immune from lawsuits and damage claims for spoliation of evidence, which is basically destroying evidence. And so it can be intentional, like I'm going to intentionally destroy this, or it could be negligent. In other words, I didn't do a good enough job of making sure that this encounter was recorded. Spoliation of evidence is not, generally speaking, a claim on its own. Like, you don't sue someone on its own for spoliation. It's generally attached to another lawsuit. So let's say that an officer, there's a claim that an officer used excess force, and at the same time, the video is mysteriously missing. What they'll do is they'll say, we have a lawsuit for excessive force, and then now we can add in a claim for you spoliated the evidence by not making sure the video is recording. And that allows them to bring extra damages. The way that the Tort Claims Act works is that for all of the exceptions from immunity that the officer has, we are required to basically indemnify them, and our insurance, as it currently exists, already covers this section that they've amended. So the law already requires us to cover these guys, and that our insurance already agrees to cover this. So what they've inserted this into is a provision that is already the normal provision that already is functioning in our system with regard to police officers. So it doesn't change the system we have with regard to the coverage of officers in terms of liability for lawsuits. It just adds 2 new potential sources of bad that you can sue them for. And that's what this really does. And so that's distinguished from maybe some you hear in the news about, repealing qualified immunity or things like that. That's really a separate issue. Qualified immunity is a federal lawsuit that you can bring. It has nothing to do with this. This is the Tort Claims Act.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Angela?
Mhm.
You didn't have anything else? Any other questions? No?
Thank you, Chief.
Well, I have a real problem with this coming down from the state, but that's my personal opinion. So I can't do anything about it. Our hands are tied.
Well,
And I pray and thank the Lord that we're that far ahead of everybody else.
we at the Roswell Police Department appreciate all the support the community gives us. And when we hear about our brothers and sisters all over the country, we feel very fortunate that we're here, even with the 108-degree weather. And there was an hour on that.
Okay,
It's-
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we're on to number 8. Mr. Morris, this has to do with Housing Development Program.
What we have here is a presentation on it's a proposal on how to modify the building process within the city. And the question that we start with is, do current city policies, practices, and regulations curb new construction activities, especially residential? We did a couple of years ago an affordable housing or housing study, which demonstrated we need a lot of new housing, and it's just not happening on the scale that we are really looking for. So what we're proposing to do is come up with a system that basically provides incentives for development of community, for the development community, that will encourage new market rate housing, meaning at market rates. Also encourage development of new affordable housing, places vacant city-owned properties back on the tax rolls, because we've got quite a few of them. Increases the number of housing units that will use water and sewer and trash services that we'll collect fees from. Replace residential houses lost to code enforcement, abatement activities, and provide for renewed community development inside some of these declining neighborhoods. A lot of these areas have been decimated. There are some areas that just look like parks. You've got streets and sidewalks and hydrants and no houses. It's really kind of weird. And then finally, look at a way to kind of streamline land development process. So the idea is to look at our properties and then look at our building permit process to see if we can combine them to create something that might encourage builders to build new housing. These are some of the fees that we collect individually. Building permit fees, mechanical fees, plumbing fees, parking lot fees if you're a commercial project, water and sewer taps, water meters. In addition, we have this thing called frontage fees. and park fees. And basically those, the frontage fees were done a long time ago to help extend the major water lines and sewer lines throughout the city. And these are things that were done back in the 50s, and we've been collecting based on the frontage of a house. So in this particular case, just an example, here's $200,000 value on a new house with 100 feet of frontage. They're gonna be chipping in not only the building permit fee of $2,000, but frontage and park fees of another $2,000. And so what we're looking at is saying, okay, are we really looking at short-term financial benefits, or are we really should be looking at long-term? And by that is, I mean, if we're concerned about what we collect up front, I think that's a short-term look, because that typical house is going to be there for 60 years. During that 60 years, there'll be property taxes and water bills and trash pickup, all these things paid, plus the GRT that's generated by a family living in that house that doesn't exist today, over 60 years. So if the concern is what are we making, maybe we're too worried about what's up front, getting our building permit fee and our frontage fee and versus 60 years worth of value that house can provide. In addition, since this is the public safety part of this, we really are looking at trying to stabilize neighborhoods, putting new houses in neighborhoods that hopefully will help to stabilize them so we don't have to hire so many police or have so many EMS calls out to these locations. Trying to build the community versus trying to find out how to, the additional costs for public safety. So that's why we're doing this. We're also going to be presenting this to all the other 4 committees, but we're starting with you guys. And I think that there's a clear nexus between if you're able to put owner-occupied units, new ones, into a neighborhood that's been declining, you've got people there now that will fight for that community because that's their property. They have a vested interest. And it's in our interest to put what we can, those new owners, into those new buildings, into those communities. Now, obviously, there are areas that it's not a problem. I mean, they're just building, that's crazy, that's great. But it's trying to get new housing into some of the older areas that need help. So, short-term versus long-term. Now, currently in the code, we have a couple of incentives already. First off is with building permit fees. And basically, those put in for multifamily, and it was really done to help assist Spring River Apartments. And basically, the more units that you bring in for construction, the bigger your reduction is on the building fees. You can see the sliding scale. A little lesser known is a provision in the code that says that we will grant by right a 50% density bonus if you can figure out how to park it, how to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. If you can make it all fit, we'll give you 50% more density by right without any special, no P&Z or city council. And so the idea is if somebody can get creative and they can figure it out, they can actually make a lot more because especially in affordable housing where your profit margins aren't so good, you need density. That offsets the smaller profit margin on units. So these are already in there, but what else can we do? And so here's what we're talking about. One, we want to consolidate all of the fees that we have into a single number based on some criteria we'll talk about in a second, a single number and a single application. So you don't have to put in a building fee or a building permit over here and then another form for your tap fee over here and your frontage fees over here. And one form, one number, and then you just call in for inspections or the services. Density bonus and permit fee we just talked about, that's already existing, but that's part of the program. And then one of the more interesting parts for me, provide property for construction activities at heavily discounted rates, especially for affordable housing residential units. And you see the matrix that we're talking about here. Basically, if you're doing affordable housing, it's not a problem with the $300,000 homes and such. They're able to do what they need to do, but still one fee, one application. Sliding scale. If you're down, if your valuation is less than $300,000, then your permit fee is $2,000. If it's less than, down to the last, let's see, the three up, the affordable single-family residential unit, which will be about $150,000 with a parcel, we're saying 1 permit fee, and we'll throw in the property. We've got properties. And so the idea is to kind of package this stuff up. What we want to do is go to a builder and say, we've got properties. And we'll, not only will we give you a discount on the permit fees, we'll throw in a piece of property for you. And you do something with it. You build a house, and you put somebody in that house. If you already got a piece of property, your permit's $750, and then a reduction also for the modular housing. And so the idea here is to try to make it simple, and it's all about financial for these folks with the construction guys. They, make it simple, quick, and predictable. And the idea is, instead of having all of these fees, make it one number. The properties right now that we're talking about, we're mowing because we have to mow our own lawns. And so we're not getting a lot of tax, and a lot of these are not valuable by themselves. They're not like up in the super duper properties, or else they'd already been sold off to somebody else to do it. But we're trying to encourage development of new houses in a lot of these areas that need the help. So Todd is going to take you through the process here of how are we looking at how this might be structured.
Thank you very much. I have been working with Bill and legal and code enforcement in identifying our existing properties. How they're acquired right now, of course, is through inventory or donations. We acquire the property. Some of it comes to us from the Clean and Safe program. Some of them now will come to us through the chronic nuisance program. But we obtain the property. I vet it, make sure that we've got clean title and all of that with it. And I'm currently cataloging these properties. Then what we have is basically we're just calling kind of a one sheet, a quick look at the important information that a builder or a contractor would want to know about a particular piece of property. It has the location on there, the assessor information from the actual value, taxable value, what it's zoned for, its size, legal description, and whether or not there is already city utilities available for that property. So it's a quick and clean, easy way to be able to say, somebody goes, hey, I want that information on this property, and here you go. Here's everything that you need to know. Then, after the vetting and cataloging process with that, I'll be working with Juanita and her department to market these properties back out. We're going to I have a meeting with her tomorrow to get further into this, but we are going to be using various sorts of social media and other media sites, our website, city website, to be able to put these properties up to make sure that everybody has enough public notice and ways to be able to find out what the city has as far as inventory goes. Then we move on to the sale of the property, either the market rate properties based on the property assessor value, clean and clear title, the non-market rate properties with the affordability period of 5, and that's 5 years, correct? Yes. Okay. And then introduce the incentives for the property sales, consolidate fees, like Bill was saying, into a simple form, one fee. The density, explain the density bonuses, and the single application. So that's kind of what we've been working on up to this point.
Okay. The affordability period is a term that we use because that allows us to get around the anti-donation clause with respect to the donation of properties. And that is for affordable housing. The donation property or the affordability period on this is 5 years that we have. And basically what it means is that if a contractor builds a house, they can sell it to a family, and it's expected that that family or whoever, that entity, would live in that house for 5 years, at least 5 years, at which point they could then do with it what they wanted. The idea is that they sold it before the end of that 5-year affordability period, any profits go back to the city, and that would be something, that would be one of the sales instruments that would be reported. So the idea is we're trying to encourage home occupancy or owner-occupied units, not just creating rentals. Now, rentals are good because they're new, but owner-occupied is the best, because that's our tigers in the woods there, protecting their properties. And so that's the intent there, or whatever other conditions that we come up with the city. So one of the things that would have to happen to make all this work, we're going to have to do a lot of work in these following areas. Chapter 26, which is all your utilities. Chapter 6, which is the building and building regulations. And then also there's going to have to be a lot of policy work with how all this works within the department. Basically laying out who does what, when, and how, right? And so making sure that it all works. And then also that there's an understanding that while the community development will lose short-term fees in the immediate future, if this happens, that we'll recoup those fees long-term. The idea is to build up our housing stock with those single-family homes and multifamily, and that will happen over the long term. As I said before, this is a concept approval right now. What we're trying to do is, before we spend 150 man-hours on a lot of these text amendments and spring it on you guys, the idea is to kind of go through the process and say, okay, do we kind of like this? Do we not like this? Yes, no, or any comments before we take it formally, because we don't, just trying to spend that much time and then say, oh no, we don't like it. If it goes and crash and burns, it's kind of a waste. And so the idea was to get some ideas and kind of, do I see heads going up and down, or, what are you thinking kind of looks. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're going to be bringing it back to all the committees and also to the city council before, but we're still continuing to work on some of this stuff. And, okay. And also, we're also looking to expand this into non-residential as well. We also have some commercial properties that we'd also potentially like to work with the private sector on letting go. Clearly at the airport, we have a whole bunch of properties that are industrial. So this is kind of a subsection, if you would, of the whole property thing, if you were to bring them all together. And, what happens if it doesn't work? Well, there's always another phase 2, possibly some other strategies. Some states, the manager has explained that in South Dakota, they have a process by which the state has developed a prototype manufactured house, because they had the same issue, trying to find affordable housing. And so they have a governor's house, is what they call it. It's a standard house, and you can go and buy it, and it's funded through the state. But that's their solution, because the private sector wasn't able to do that as much. But we want to try to give as much of this to the private sector, because we think they can do a better job. And we're hoping that we can work with them as partners. And so that's where we're at. And it's just, like I said, this is just an overview of a concept that we're putting together. And we will take it to city council, because, like I said, before we spend a lot of time, because a lot of time's going to have to go into this, we wanted to kind of present it and see if you got any comments.
So I have a question. Once the land is bought, is there a certain amount of time for that contractor to start building? Do you have that written down?
It will be within a year.
Okay. And you were talking about putting it on the homepage and stuff, so we're gonna have like an area where they can go over, and those contractors can just sit there and flip through the pages and make themselves a package of property together, and we give them a discount. Let's say if they buy 5 lots together, we give them a discount for taking those 5 lots on, and the price of the permits goes down. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's basically it. And,
Okay.
or whether it's a single lot or a bunch of lots, as long as we have a commitment towards the actual construction of these properties, there'll be clawback provisions in there that if you don't start building within a certain amount of time, just like other property sales that we've had, we'll take it back. Because if you can't do it, I'll get it over to another
Yeah, someone else
contractor.
can. Another question, I lost it. Judy, anything?
I think I've heard some of this before, quite some time ago. And you've expanded it. And I think it's a great idea to pursue, I really do.
I think it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
I kind of like the idea too, but it is, remember a while back you were talking about some tiny houses and that kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing that would be in some of this also?
It
You
could
mentioned
be.
about doing some tiny houses somewhere or something, and another question is, what kind of neighborhoods are we considering? Are you thinking that this would be all over? Or you have some neighborhoods that you're trying to build up in general that you want to start at? You know, at the beginning point, or you just want to start all over the city?
Right now, we've gone through, we had a master list of all the properties, and we started going through and vetting, and that was the first step. Because we have this list of properties, and we thought, oh, well, we got so many properties, and so you start to actually look at what you've got. And a lot of them are drainage easements and little slivers here, a triangle there, and so we're going through and we've identified the ones that we do have that are, right now, we could build on. And so those are the ones that Todd has been doing is what do you call them, single sheets, shiny sheets, and so wherever they happen to be at, wherever there's residential, and if somebody wants to, remember, we also have our own subdivision that we created over by Reed Street. And so we want to we'll be pointing over there too as well. There were 22 lots that we subdivided as a city to work with Habitat and anybody else who wants to come in and do affordable housing, which is our big thing. But it's also to help stabilize the neighborhoods, get people back into those neighborhoods that own those houses. That's our holy grail.
A lot of these properties come into our possession, catch as catch can, because what happens is that they are demoed and a lien is attached, and then at some point in the future, at some point down the road, we try and get a hold of the owner and they can't, and then we, at least part of what we were doing when there were 2 of us in the attorney's office was trying to go after these properties. You can actually take the lien to a foreclosure, and if nobody bids on the property, it reverts to the city. And so we got 4 or 5 properties that way when that project was active. It's kind of gone on the back burner now because the attorney's office is at half strength, but at some point in the future, we hope to ramp it back up. And so that's one of the ways we get properties, and it's nice because you get that infill, you hate that gap tooth look in the neighborhood where you've got building, house, no house, no house, right? That, you don't want that. And so this gives the opportunity to take those kind of situations and maybe fill in those in with some, with some homeowners. The challenge is for a developer, you've got one over here, then one over there, then one over there, it's not as convenient as here's a block of houses that I can develop. So that's the challenge, I think.
Good? Judy, good? Okay. Thank you. That was a lot to intake. I'm going to have to go back through it and digest a little bit of it. Are you okay with your first visit to one of the committee meetings? Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you very much. So now our number 8 is done. The rest of this is information, am I correct? Do any of the counselors have questions on any of the department updates? Because I do on one. Miss Teresa. Best. I'm not putting you on the hot seat. No, I'm not. Honest engine. So this is with Consolidated Dispatch, monthly report, and my main thing is we're still rocking along. We're still in the same building. We still have the same equipment. I would like it in the minutes to be known that the PVRCC has not met for this quarter. Am I correct?
I believe our last meeting was in February, right
Okay.
after we changed.
So right
chairs.
now,
Yes, ma'am.
we are not compliant. We are missing out. Of course, the one that is in control of this and the agendas at this point is the sheriff's department
Yes, ma'am.
at this point. So I would like it in the minutes to know that our sheriff is not communicating with our deputy city manager to get this agenda going. And for us to continue with the county and make this a viable thing to protect our fire department, our police departments, our sheriff's department, we have to keep this moving and rolling, and it's not happening. So I'm having a real problem that it's not, there's no agenda.
Yes, ma'am.
So-
I sent some messages to the sheriff and offered our IT department to help with virtual meetings, and I've not heard back. Mr. Matthews?
The last email I got from the city clerk was a meeting was scheduled for August the 5th.
Oh,
Would
I
be
didn't.
the- when the
Okay,
meeting
so
was
we've,
scheduled.
so we've jumped from February to August.
Well, I believe the last meeting was in March.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, and it's supposed to be a quarterly meeting, so
Well,
we need.
quarterly meeting.
Yeah, we need to kind of stay on this. I just want to
Yeah.
make
And
sure. that-
actually, I don't mean to disagree, but we actually voted to keep it monthly at
Okay,
our last meeting, so
oh,
it is actually supposed to be monthly.
So we're like in real big
Because of
trouble.
our challenges.
so we're like in real big trouble.
But we're not violating the
Yeah.
joint powers agreement
No.
between the city and the county. The joint powers agreement says we'll meet once a quarter. We can vote as a committee or choose as a committee to meet more often, but at a minimum, we're supposed to meet once a quarter.
Okay. I just want to bring that up and bring that to the front burner.
Sure.
And we do need more communication between the sheriff's office and our deputy manager here. So, see, you're not on the hot plate. Thank you. Do we have anything else?
I have a question. On the animals, the animal control, the list, I just wondered if during this COVID, have we seen an increase in, I don't know who that is.
Okay, good question.
Have we seen?
Good question, because a lot of the cities
Yeah,
are
'cause it's
finding that people
affected,
are
right.
adopting a lot more animals.
So are we seeing more adoptions? Are we seeing getting more animals during these last couple of months of this COVID?
Well, we've been reaching out to the rescue groups and moving a lot of animals right now. We saw an increase, obviously, the 4th of July with all the fireworks.
Yeah.
Oh,
We picked up a
runoff.
lot of animals. We almost filled the place up, which we don't like. We've built new relationships with everyone here that rescues the animals, and it's going quite well.
Good.
Very happy with that, and kicking in some marketing and taking care of business, so it's moving.
So, but you're not telling really a difference because of the COVID?
Well, not really with the COVID. We'll have like 17 people come in a day to want to adopt animals, so we try to stagger them. And it's just the way we do business. When we use the new kinds of media, Facebook and so on, people sitting at home, they can see that helps. So that, I would say yes, that has to be part of it, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah, but I wasn't sure from the last couple of months. That just said the year before, didn't give you the last couple.
And I've noticed that, our intakes are down 100 from last year. So, I mean, we just keep getting better. We're fine tuning and we seem to just keep getting better and better. Have we received our new cages for the back end of the trucks?
Yes, last week we received new cages for one of the trucks, and we're designing for the next.
Okay.
So yeah, they're different, kind of like the county, but a little bit taller.
Okay.
So that's working great. So, and the staff's taking care of business, and it's clean and been repainted, and
Awesome.
I'm kind of proud.
Okay. And we had information, or I had information, somebody had information that we're going to add to the park back there for a walking way for the dogs, for them to go out and exercise.
Yes, one of the rescue groups were a little bit concerned about taking the dogs for walks. Obviously, we don't have the staff for that, but they volunteered to buy me about $8,000 worth of fence. I'll put it up, and then the dogs can run outside.
So now we have a collaboration with our rescue groups and our animal control, and that makes me so happy that everybody's playing in the same playpen. That just
Absolutely.
makes it great. Okay.
It is. It's fantastic.
I am excited about that.
I kind of have the same question for the chief. I've noticed, have you seen crime going up during, I'm seeing a lot of kids in my neighborhood. I'm seeing a lot of graffiti in my neighborhood, because I live on the base. But I was just wondering how this, are you seeing a lot out at the base?
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of wondering, and I.
Thank you, Jim.
Sorry.
You're okay. You're good. We're an easy-growing group here.
Kind of just that there's a lot, how is this COVID thing affecting recruiting for one, kind of? And then the crime rate, how are you seeing it fluctuate over these last couple of months due to COVID?
I don't even need my notes.
Uh-oh.
First of all, the violent crime has remained about the same, but that, obviously understand, that's a fraction of the crime rate. Unfortunately, it's the most shocking because that's why it catches the most headlines and catches the most police attention because it's obviously loss of life or injury. But your property crime has increased not just because of, and our domestics have remained pretty much the same. Property crime has increased, and I wouldn't blame it all on COVID. I would blame, although the kids are out running around, I mean, they'd be going back to school in a month, right? Or now, where they would be, August, right? Don't play with me, I'm from a different part of the country, we start earlier. Anyways, the property crimes have been on a steady increase since 2017, and that's when the courts decided that the nonviolent crimes will not suffer a bond. I think it was 2018. Was it 2018? I'm sorry, it's been about 2 years, and that's, we were expecting an increase in that because you're turning loose, your higher recidivism rate is in the property crime area anyways. Your violent offenders take a little longer to reoffend, they do, but your property crimes are much more affected by that. So when they changed that law, we saw a trend upward with our property crimes. So.
You good?
Okay, my other last question, I guess, could we put the firecrackers on the nuisance?
Could we put firecrackers?
Am I clear?
I'm sick of listening to firecrackers.
Amen. Amen. Okay.
That's all.
Okay, so I think, Judy, anything? Good? Okay. So I think we're done for the day. Our next meeting is going to be August 18th, 2020. So thank you very much, and the meeting is done at 6:13. Thank you.
Public participation, you asked.